Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I want to go over the Data is Beautiful subreddit again and see if we can explore a new figure type, one that we really haven't focused on this channel, and then how we can then generate data to create that same type of figure, but put it in the chemistry context. I want to show how we can take what we're learning out in the real world and apply that into our domain area. So let's take a look. This is the Data is Beautiful subreddit. This is about new data visualizations or the stories that you can tell visually with data. So this is just one of their general threads. And we have the Super Bowl halftime performances, average age of songs performed. Let's take a look at that. So interesting. So Kendrick Lamar, who obviously was the halftime show this year, we can really see just how the time has varied quite a bit, but I digress. So here we have a bar plot. Maybe that's one for Barplots. Then we have You Thought to Think. Oh, that's a really interesting plot. You might tackle this one. Okay, let's go back. We have another bar plot. How popular are the 10 richest Americans? $244 billion. Wow. Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg. You know, honestly, of this list, I want to be these folks. They're not widely known. So what we're seeing here is the favorable is in orange, the never heard of them in gray. And if I was a billionaire, maybe one day I will be, who knows? I want to be largely unknown, I believe. These folks also have a very small unfavorable rating, whereas Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos have a sizable unfavorable, but they're largely polarizing figures. So maybe that's not too surprising, but you can see here, this is a really interesting plot. It's a really clear story. A couple of things I'm seeing is that the value is similar to 100. This is from a Reuters Ipsos poll of over 4,000 US adults. So really interesting there. This might be the type of plot we want to make. Let's just go back and see if there's a few others. Net migration during COVID. Let's look at New York City traffic citations. That's interesting. Okay. So what I want to do is just go back to this plot here. I think this is interesting because it's a really clear story. I think we can imagine lots of scenarios where visualizing data in this way at work for our own scientific needs would be really important. So what I want to do is just copy this image and then paste it into ChatGPT and ask it to give me a data set, a chemistry relevant data set that will allow me to recreate a figure like this. And then I will take that data, move it into my Python environment, and we will use Python to make a similar type of stacked bar plot. Okay, so I've done just that. Give me a chemistry related data set and Python code that would make this type of bar plot here. And there, that just came from the figure that we saw in the Data is Beautiful subreddit. And so here is a chemistry data set where we have hydrogen, helium, carbon, nitrogen, all the way to uranium, and the favorability score, apparently, the never heard it, the did not answer, and the unfavorable. So this is somewhat of an odd data set, but at least it gives us what's important. Each of these rows sums to 100, so we can make that same type of stacked bar plot, even though perhaps these categories aren't the most relevant in the chemistry context. Notwithstanding, I also asked it to just give me some code that will allow me to recreate this particular bar plot as well to see what it would do. So we see at the beginning of this Python script, here we have our data set where we have each element, hydrogen, helium, carbon through uranium, and then the favorable, never heard of it, did not answer, and unfavorable score for each of these elements. At the bottom part of this, it has given us a set of subplots where we're going to use Matplotlib, it looks like, yes, to then create our data table where it's going to also give us the hex code to produce the greenish color, the gray color, an orange color, and a red color. Now, I'm not a huge fan. I think it really tried to get really close, but I don't like how complicated this code looks for the type of simple figure that I want to demonstrate in this video. So let's simplify it. Let's look for another library that I think will give us the type of figure we're looking for, perhaps with a single argument. So I'm going to move this into my Python environment and we're going to proceed. So let me copy this here and we're going to move this into our VS Code environment. So now we are ready to get started. I'm going to import Pandas as PD and I'm going to use Plotly Express to make the figure. So let me run this cell here and then show this data frame. So I've made a couple edits to the data frame. I'm going to set the index to element, which is a slight modification from the original source code. We're going to just treat all these numbers. You can imagine that we can easily change these values to something way more relevant, but I want to capture the fact that we are summing these up to 100. Each of these rows will sum up to 100, which is the important part for sort of getting that equal level for our stacked bar plot. Now, the code that was given to us by ChatGPT was using Matplotlib, but I want to show this using Plotly Express, because when we have a data frame that looks like this, it's really straightforward to make the figure that we're looking for. Again, that stacked bar plot. So let's do that. Simply, we just need to use the px.bar, the plotlyexpress.bar method, and we could just pass in our data frame. And let's set this to fig and then say fig.show. And just like that, we already have our bar plot. And this is what's really nice about Plotly Express, is that we can also handle some of the interactivity. So let's say we focus on the favorability of each of our elements. We can see that we can just double click this legend here, and that will select just the variable that we are double clicking. If we double click it again, it will bring all of these samples back on. If we double click never heard of it, we can see that at least in this contrived data set, that sodium and uranium are relatively unknown. There were some that had no answer, so we did not answer. This is typically of the chlorine. So this is obviously a very oversimplified way to show this, but I did want to demonstrate that with plotlyexpress.bar, we can do this. Now, if we were to say overlay, just change that up, we can, and it will automatically change the opacity. If we did not do that automatically, we can just say opacity equals and just set some value there if you wanted to do that. So let's go back to stack. Now we can change a few other things just while we're already looking at plotlyexpress.bar. We can change the template, which is essentially how the data is plotted, what colors are used. And we can set this to dark. We can use simple white, and we have lots of options. You can see that it changes the full colorway of the figure, but we do maintain the interactivity. We can also save this figure as a .png file. If we were to store this notebook as an HTML, we would maintain the interactivity. So lots of cool things with this figure. And so definitely consider using this as you leverage your Python skills to make figures. If you want to see the full options, we can just go to the API reference to understand what we have. And here we can see that there are lots of arguments in the documentation, from how to facet the rows, the column spacing, any text you want to add to the figure. And so this is really nice. So I oftentimes just start here though, where this is just the getting started with Plotly, because it's usually much easier to find interesting examples for how to quickly get started. So just check this out as well. If you want to understand how you can build not just bar plots, but scatter plots, you can incorporate different widgets. And of course, this is all easily accessible because you are already on your Python journey. In any case, I will see you in the next video. Peace.